wealthy individuals can be great for space research. So today there was results published in the SOMA Space Omics and Medical Atlas. And this atlas contains research findings from the NASA twin study. If you remember, that was when Scott Kelly was in space and his twin brother Mark was on Earth, and then they compared DNA findings and other medical findings from Scott's trip in space to Mark, who was the control down on the ground. First time there's been one twin in space for approximately a year and one on the ground, and that was pretty cool to compare. Now, that was a NASA study. Also involved in the SOMA is the JAXA CFE study, and CFE stands for Cell-Free Epigenome. I am not a biological scientist. I'm a physical scientist, so bear with me here. And those are government agencies, right? But I want to talk about commercial human spaceflight. Also in SOMA are results from Inspiration 4, which was that free-flying mission around Earth in a SpaceX Dragon capsule for about 3 days. And those are the findings that were released today. That's really exciting. Also involved in this study are the Polaris program, which is not surprising because Jarek Isaacman is the one who funded the Inspiration 4 mission. He is the rich guy who paid his way to space with Inspiration 4, along with 3 other additional crew members who he chose. And now he's going to go again for at least 3 additional missions through the Polaris program, with Polaris Dawn currently scheduled to launch in July. And let's see, Axiom is also involved in this. So Axiom has launched 3 private missions to the International Space Station along with SpaceX. And those are largely paying individuals with like one Axiom crew member who's a former NASA astronaut. So the exciting thing here is that private individuals, private astronauts are contributing medical research to these medical studies. There have been very few people, relatively speaking, who have gone to space, and even fewer who have put forward this kind of modern medical research in terms of their own genetics and all the different things, all the different physical characteristics that medical scientists look for when they are trying to evaluate how space or how microgravity conditions or how the radiation environment affects human life. And this is extremely important if we want to become a spacefaring species or a multiplanetary species, because we do not know how human biology can stay in microgravity long term, longer than a year. And we don't know how human biology can sustain itself in a radiation environment, say on the surface of the moon or on Mars or any other planetary body that isn't protected from a magnetosphere and atmosphere. And so it's just one of these things where we are lacking significant amounts of data. And as a scientist, I like data. These private individuals, these wealthy individuals did not need to contribute to science. They chose to do so on their own. In fact, that first Axiom mission was so overloaded with research. They had so little time to look out the window to enjoy themselves, and only because their return flight was delayed, the return to home, the return back to Earth was delayed, did they get a chance to breathe at the end of that Axiom 1 mission. Axiom 2 and 3 had similar research projects. I know that suborbitally speaking, there have been some wealthy individuals as well as others who were sponsored by other institutes who did medical research on themselves. When I last spoke to a representative from Blue Origin, he told me that Blue Origin is not keeping track of the private individuals who pay their own way, who are paying customers, whether or not they do any kind of research in space, let alone research on their own bodies. Suborbital space is only, 3.5, 4 minutes of space flight. The high G environment, along with the microgravity environment, combined might give you some extra information. So the launch itself is the high G environment, the hyper G, and that might give you some good information. And one thing that we can know, even if they don't do research, specific research on themselves, is we can know the types of people who are flying. So for example, Blue Origin has flown William Shatner, Wally Funk, Ed Dwight, older individuals who I don't believe had any kind of medical equipment attached to them, but just the very fact that these people in their 80s and 90s, they flew to space, they went through the hyper G and then micro G and re-entry, they survived spaceflight without, as far as I know, any medical conditions afterward. So just the very fact that they went through spaceflight gives us medical data. But even more valuable are the people who take blood in space or wear some kind of equipment, some vital monitors and that kind of thing, to really tell us scientists what is it that they're going through? What are their bodies going through? So one of the things that was released today, for example, was that the Inspiration 4 crew, which was only up for 3 days, they experienced changes in their body. There was a member of the crew who was actually a trained physician's assistant, Haley Arsenault, and she actually took blood from each of the crew members and determined that very, very quickly in their space flight, their bodies started changing. Just the very fact that they were able to draw blood and realize that space changes human beings pretty much immediately. I mean, like, that's really cool. And not only that, those changes continued even after their space flights. So the human body is very adaptable. Apparently the female body can go through the stresses of space more easily. And there have been so few female astronauts throughout history that we just don't have really good information about how the male and female body differs when it comes to spaceflight. So with the increase in the accessibility of space open to wealthier individuals or people who are paid to go along with wealthier individuals, it's just kind of amazing to think that we're going to get so much more data than we ever have before. Suborbital, orbital, maybe hopefully cislunar and lunar. And so I think that's extremely exciting for what that means in terms of the data that can be gathered with, whether directly with, direct observation of the human body or indirectly just based on the demographics of the people who are going. So when anybody tries to criticize the fact that there are people who are paying their way to space, first off, they're doing great research, and they're also giving spaceflight providers some really good research, some really good data about their own flights and, maturing the technology and all of that. Not to mention the money that goes towards maturing the technology and getting through the development phases and operations and profitability. So all in all, I'm a big fan of people paying their way to space. I'm hoping that someday I will be a private spaceflight participant in some way or another. Don't know if I'll be able to pay my own way or not, but I hope that when I do get to space, I'm able to contribute scientifically in multiple ways. Physically with my own body, but also as a scientist, as a trained physicist, I will be able to do other kinds of experimentation. What would you like to do? So let me know in the comments whether you would like to contribute to science in some way or another if you would want to go to space, and I'll talk to you later.